Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. This is the first video in a series of me, a writer, watching movies about writers. Authors Anonymous is a movie about a creative writing group. They're being followed around by a camera crew that we never get to see. It's kind of like Modern Family. They're being filmed for a documentary, but we never get to see or hear anything from the documentary crew themselves, just moments where the characters are sitting and talking direct to camera and supposedly answering questions. The movie starts with us being introduced to each member of the creative writing group. We meet Colette and Alan Mooney, who are a married couple. Alan considers himself to be an ideas guy. At no point in the movie do we get to see any of his writing, but we just see him walking around with a dictaphone, periodically taking out and recording not actual story, but ideas for titles or character names or just general premises. Colette is very, very concerned about appearances. We see her take the film crew into this beautiful outdoor garden area with dogs barking and equipment running in the background. She has to shout to be heard. She talks about it being her place of solitude and tranquility, the place where she comes to meditate and write in her journal, and she says all this whilst putting in earplugs. We meet John K. Buxton, who is ex-military and always refers to himself not only in the third person, but as the full name third person all the time. And unsurprisingly, he's writing a story which appears to have a very strong military violence kind of thing going on. We never get to hear anything about the actual theme or plot of it. We meet William, who came to LA to follow in the footsteps of Bukowski, and he talks about how he had to come and get to know the people, Bukowski's people, in order to follow in his footsteps and be that kind of writer. And he spends all of his time in a cafe writing down what people are saying. At one point we see him getting so close to someone while he's doing this that he's leaning across from his table to listen into their conversation whilst writing down what they're saying, and they notice. Just as a side note, this kind of comes across like kind of a caricature of what a writer might do. Like, no writer would actually do that. Yeah, we would. Not necessarily the leaning across and listening and blatantly doing it, but I do know someone who spent a year carrying around her phone recording every conversation she had, whether that was with her gynecologist, her husband, her mother, complete strangers in waiting rooms. Everything was recorded and went into a novel. Hannah is a bright and bubbly personality who is dedicated to her writing, her mantra being the writing always comes first. We also see that she's not a very educated person, with the film crew repeatedly throughout the movie asking her who her favourite author is and her never having an answer. Lastly, there's Henry, who studied creative writing at university and has read all the big great American novels and is totally obsessed with them, and will go to historic locations throughout the city which have literary connections. He quotes various authors. He's very, very preoccupied with those sorts of things. So that's our collection of characters. They get together, they read their work out loud, and they offer feedback. All is going well until Hannah gets an agent, and the group don't take it well.
He's my new agent.
John K. Buxton decides that he's going to self-publish his novel immediately, even though it's not ready for publication, so that he is technically the first to be published, because his book will be ready in a few weeks, whereas hers won't be ready for another year. The group has a really negative reaction to this. They don't necessarily tell him not to do it, but there's a very judgmental tone that, oh, self-publishing, which isn't necessary. I mean, self-publishing is a perfectly legitimate option. Unfortunately, John K. Buxton goes to a vanity press and the quality of the books he receives is extremely low. Where there should be a lion on the cover, there's a small dog, and the back cover is written in Chinese. So he does have a very negative experience because of his rush and choice of a vanity press over a more legitimate self-publishing option. When they find out that Hannah has an agent, Colette and Ellen dismiss it as, oh, she must have slept with him, immediately casting some doubt as to whether or not she deserves the success that she has earned. Colette ramps up her efforts to get an agent, including harassing a couple of people. It's super awkward. Yeah. We also find out that Colette is having an affair with William. Henry does ask Hannah out. He doesn't necessarily make it super clear that he means a romantic outing, he just frames it as a drive around seeing the sights. And he takes her to his favourite places in the city, which have literary histories, and expects her to know exactly why these addresses are important. And when she doesn't know what he's talking about, he tries to quote The Great Gatsby at her as a way of jogging her memory as to why this random street address is important. She's super embarrassed and even asks the camera crew to stop filming. Their date comes to an end, Henry kisses her, she says no, the writing comes first and walks away. At their next writing meetup, Henry starts talking about his story and how he thinks it's changing and the relationship between his two main characters is growing and deepening.
Nah, don't buy it.
They're just friends, okay? Don't muck it up.
And the entire group very strongly disagree with him, insisting that he's been writing about a friendship, not a romantic relationship, and to just not go there at all. And he asks Hannah for her opinion and she's super uncomfortable, and it's really clear at this point that she is consciously aware of the fact that he has been writing about their relationship, and she has to spell it out for him that they're friends. She's never thought of the characters as, well, obviously them, as being anything more than friends, and that's it. So obviously Henry is sad. One of Henry's two jobs is delivering pizzas, and he delivers pizza to the house of his big idol author, only to find Hannah there in nothing but a shirt. And he tears strips off her for having a life outside of writing with someone obviously other than him, and really gets into her for not having read the various authors that he thinks she should have read. There's nothing about his reaction that's appropriate. Yes, it might be disappointing to see someone that you have feelings for in a relationship with someone else, but that doesn't justify you tearing strips off them, and someone not having read the same books as you doesn't make them less of a writer under any circumstance. It doesn't matter what author it is that you think they should have read. This altercation seems to break Henry out of the writer's block that he's been suffering from, and he writes brand new pages and is very excited to share them with the rest of the group at their next meeting. But further fights ensue and the group completely dissolves at the meeting instead. The movie ends with Henry getting a book contract, with the agent who signed him talking about how he predicts a bestseller and a movie deal and gushing about how great of a story it is. This movie is far from perfect in terms of its portrayals of self-publishing and female writers and the value of education to a writer. John K. Buxton's experience with a vanity press isn't quite done right. Yes, vanity presses exist and they aren't great, but they are not equal to all self-publishing experiences. And it needed to be made clearer, I think, that he had a sort of specifically negative experience, not the typical self-publishing experience. The movie makes it sound as if self-publishing isn't a legitimate publication option, which it definitely is. I think it's unfortunate that both of the female writers in the group are portrayed as sleeping their way to the top. We see that Colette met Alan when she was working as a masseuse and gave him a few extras, and then she's cheating on him with someone else, and when she does get an agent towards the end of the story, it's kind of by piggybacking along with a more successful man. So yeah, we get this very negative view of how Colette behaves and gains things in her life. Unfortunately, this also happens a little bit with Hannah. When she first gets her agent, people are assuming that it's just because she's pretty and oh, she must have slept with him and those sorts of things. But we also see her working really hard and being super dedicated to her work. So initially it feels like everyone is just being very disrespectful of her because she happens to be beautiful as well as successful in her writing. But later she takes up with a successful author and quits the writing group, and unfortunately it creates this image where the two women in the group are both sleeping their way to the top one way or another. And again, I think this is a bit of a disservice because it reduces the legitimacy and value of the successes of both female characters in the group. Even though Hannah is the character who's the most successful throughout the movie and Henry's eventual success is almost a footnote at the end, we are still told throughout the movie that he's the most talented writer in the group. The fact that he is the college educated one and he's the one who's read all these books kinda sucks as a result, because that type of education doesn't make you a good writer. It's not necessary. So coupling the two together I think is a confusing message. I think it's good that the other successful writer isn't an educated person, so in some ways they balance each other out, but then you've kind of coloured Hannah's story with the suggestion that she didn't earn it, and it's suggested that Henry did earn it, he and his university education and his having read Fitzgerald. I don't know that this movie is something which would appeal to people who aren't writers. It seems very niche, but if you're a writer, I think you'll probably enjoy this. If you've enjoyed this video, do give it a like, and if you're new around here, maybe consider hitting subscribe and ringing that bell so you can stay up to date. If you've seen Authors Anonymous, leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought of it. And if you've got any movies that you would like me to review in the future, leave those in the comments as well. I'll see you next time. Bye. I don't know how to end a review video. Was that good enough?